My name is Eleanor Crayton. I am 81 years old, and I have spent nearly every moment of my adult life pouring love into a family that was never truly mine. You probably know someone like me, quiet, dependable, the one always there at birthdays, holidays, graduations. The one holding the camera instead of being in the photos. The one who remembers everyone's favorite dessert, who always says yes, even when she's tired, even when she's hurting. But no one remembers the one who says yes. I raised her. Her name is Callie, my daughter-in-law. Though if you ask her today, she might act like we were nothing more than a long-term babysitting arrangement. But once upon a time, she was like a daughter to me. Back when her own mother left this world too early, and she found herself in my kitchen, crying into her tea, I pulled her close and told her she'd never be alone again. Back then, she clung to me like a lifeline. Trusted me with her grief. Called me mom even before the wedding. And when the children came, oh, how I loved them. I changed their diapers. I rocked them to sleep while Callie returned to school, then to work, then to herself. I missed weddings, cruises, and even my own sister's funeral because someone had to stay back with the babies. That someone was me. No one asked. They just expected it. I was always there, holding the fragile center together while Callie and my son Everett built their picture-perfect world around me. And for a time I didn't mind. Until the day I walked down the hallway and saw what they had done. It was a Saturday. The house was filled with chatter and music. A new family portrait hung above the mantel. A big, framed photo taken at the beach. Everyone was in it. Callie, Everett, the kids, even their golden retriever. Everyone but me. I stared at that picture for nearly 10 minutes. I wasn't behind the camera that day. I had taken the train home early to prepare dinner. I should have been there. I was there. I just wasn't invited to be seen. The next week, the children stopped calling me grandma and started calling me Eleanor. I asked Callie why. She smiled and said, "Oh, they're just growing up. Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally." When they moved houses, my room got smaller. When they hosted family gatherings, I was told not to bother, that the younger folks had it covered. And one evening when Callie was tired and angry and letting her tongue run without care, she called me just the help. In front of the kids. And they laughed. Like I hadn't scrubbed vomit off their sheets at 2 a.m. Like I hadn't pawned my grandmother's ring to help pay for their first daycare deposit. Like I hadn't sacrificed the last good years of my retirement to raise their children while they lived like royalty. And that day something in me died. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded the last of the laundry, set it on the edge of Callie's bed, and walked into my little room. Packed a single suitcase. Took my photo album, my late husband's watch, and my slippers. Left behind the tea I liked and the quilt I made by hand for Callie when she was pregnant with Clara. And I walked away. No goodbye. No note. Just gone. They didn't even call. Not once. Months passed. And then last week, a pink invitation arrived. Please join us to celebrate the baby shower of Clara Monroe. Clara. My sweet granddaughter. I stared at the delicate cursive, the pastel envelope, the RSVP card that had no box for forgotten family. And I knew what I had to do. Because there's a secret I've kept all these years. Something they never knew I knew. And when I walk through those baby shower doors, that secret is coming with me. If this story stirred something in your heart, just wait. What's coming next will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss any moment. They say memory fades with age. That we old folks forget things. Dates, names, where we left the salt shaker. But what they never tell you is this. We may forget the little things. But the big things. The betrayals, the moments that shattered us. Oh, we remember those with chilling clarity. Like fire etched into ice. And I remembered everything. After I left their house, I rented a small room above a florist's shop on Beechwood Avenue. Smelled like lilies and loss. It was quiet. Too quiet sometimes. But it was mine. No one barged in. No one handed me a baby and left without saying thank you. No one rolled their eyes when I asked to be included. I spent the first few days in bed. My back ached from years of bending, not just physically but emotionally. And every time I closed my eyes, I heard Callie's voice again, sharp and smug. She's just the help. Just the help. But as I sat alone, watching sunlight filter through the thin curtains, something strange happened. I started to breathe again. I made tea for myself. I read books without being interrupted. I went to the park, fed the ducks, watched the children play from a distance. And slowly, I felt pieces of myself crawl back into my skin. But I never stopped thinking about Clara, my granddaughter, the little girl who once called me Nana L, who used to sneak downstairs and ask for bedtime stories from when dinosaurs still walked the earth. I wondered what Callie had told her about me. If anything, had I simply been erased? I didn't know. Until the day I ran into a familiar face. It was at the library of all places. I was checking out a book about healing from grief. One of those titles that makes you wince when you realize it applies to you. And there behind the counter was Jenna, Clara's childhood best friend. She was grown now. A young woman with dyed pink hair and a tattoo of a sunflower on her wrist. But I'd know those dimples anywhere. "Mrs. Crayton?" she asked, stunned. "Is it really you?" I smiled, trying not to cry. "Last I checked," I said softly. She stepped out from behind the desk and hugged me before I could brace myself. "I thought you moved away," she whispered. "Clara said you." "Well, she didn't say much. Just that you weren't around anymore." "Did she say why?" I asked. Jenna hesitated. "She said it wasn't her story to tell." Wasn't her story. Callie had taken that from her too then. Had rewritten the truth to suit her image. That's when the first seed of revenge took root. Not the cruel kind. Not the kind you see in television thrillers or bitter court dramas. No, this revenge would be delicate, thoughtful. A poetic justice only a grandmother could execute. Because the truth. I wasn't just the help. And if Callie wanted the world to forget what I did for her, for Everett, for Clara and the twins, then I'd simply remind them. Not with shouting. Not with slander. But with something far more permanent. You see, there's a secret in this story I haven't told you yet. Something even Callie doesn't know. And the day Clara's baby shower invitation arrived in that pastel envelope, I knew. It was time. Time to dust off the one thing Callie thought was long buried. The thing I promised to keep hidden out of loyalty. Out of love. But she killed that love the day she called me just the help. And what she didn't realize was that her whole life, her marriage, her perfect house, even her children's last names, was built on a lie. A lie I knew. A lie I had kept buried deep. Till now. I RSVP'd to the baby shower that evening. The card asked, "Will you attend?" Checked yes. And underneath, in neat handwriting, I wrote, "Looking forward to sharing a very special gift." If this chapter sent shivers down your spine, wait until you hear the truth Eleanor's been carrying all these years. What secret could shake an entire family tree? Like, comment your guesses below, and subscribe. It's going to be a revelation no one will see coming. The morning of the baby shower arrived with bright skies and mocking sunshine. I stared at the pale yellow invitation one more time, running my fingers over the embossed letters like they might burn away under my touch. It was being held at the Willow House, an upscale event venue with chandeliers too fancy for a family like ours. I suppose Callie wanted her baby shower to feel like royalty had arrived. Pink roses, gold lettering, crystal favors. All perfectly staged. All perfectly fake. I dressed slowly. Not because of my age but because I knew this day would change everything. I pulled out the navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years. The one from my anniversary party with Frank. Back when love meant something, and loyalty was a currency people still traded in. I fastened the brooch. Slipped on my wedding band even though my husband had passed 10 years ago. Looked in the mirror and whispered, "It's time." Took the bus. Because power, when quiet, hums louder than a Cadillac. When I stepped into that ballroom, all chatter stopped. I watched them scan me. Some in confusion, others in shock. Clara's mouth fell open. She looked like a girl who'd seen a ghost. "Callie." Oh, she didn't miss a beat. She walked toward me, heels clicking like gunshots on the tile, smile plastered like paint on cracked drywall. Well, look who it is, she said sweetly. Didn't expect you to make it. I said I'd come, I replied. I always keep my promises. There was silence between us, the kind that buzzes in your bones. People started whispering. Who was I? Why was she so tense around me? But she recovered. She always does. Guided me to a seat far from the head table, next to a floral arrangement bigger than my entire kitchen. I didn't touch the cake. Didn't sip the champagne. Waited. Callie made a show of opening gifts. Diaper bags, bibs that said Mommy's Angel, and a stroller with more features than a spaceship. Laughter. Flashbulbs. Oof. Until Clara stood up with a microphone in her hand. She was radiant, round with child, cheeks flushed with joy. And then her voice cracked. I want to thank my mom, of course, for putting this all together. And my grandma, wherever she is now. The room froze. Everyone turned. And I stood up. My chair scraped loud against the marble. I walked to the center of the room. Callie hissed under her breath. What are you doing? I'm answering her, I said calmly. She just called for her grandma. And here I am. Clara blinked, stunned. You came, she whispered. I never left, sweetheart. I was just erased. I took the microphone gently. And then I told the story. Not all of it. Not yet. Just the part that mattered. How I changed Clara's diapers. How I bathed her, sang to her, sat beside her when she had nightmares. How I lent Callie and Everett the money they used for the down payment on their house. How I sacrificed my retirement, 30 years of work gone in one transaction so they could get on their feet. And how, once they were stable, once the photos were hung and the curtains pressed and the social media smiles posted, they wiped me from the wall like a stain. I wasn't just the help, I said quietly. I was the foundation. The room was silent. Even the babies stopped crying. Clara's eyes filled with tears. But Callie's, hers were burning. I looked her straight in the face and said, You built your life on a lie, Callie. But I kept the receipts. I pulled a folded document from my purse. Not dramatic, just quiet. Held it out. You told everyone you bought that house with your own savings. But this is the deed. Still has my name on it. You never filed the paperwork. Gasps echoed. And you want to know something else? I turned to the room. She told people I was just a babysitter. But here's the guardianship form she had me sign when Clara was a baby. Erased her. Legally. Morally. Practically. Callie lunged, trying to grab the papers. But Clara stepped between us. Is this true? She demanded. Mom, is any of this true? Callie didn't answer. Her silence screamed. I looked at Clara one last time. Then I handed her the envelope. Read it when you're ready. I'm done being quiet. And with that I walked out. No tears. No shouting. Just dignity. And finally peace. If this chapter shattered your expectations, wait until, where the cracks in Callie's perfect world become a fault line no one can ignore. Like, comment what you would have done in Eleanor's shoes. And don't forget to subscribe to uncover what happens when the past fights its way back to the present. By the time I stepped outside into the cool spring air, the sound of muffled gasps and murmuring guests still echoed behind me like the tail end of a storm. I didn't look back. Not once. My hands trembled, not from fear or regret, but from the sheer weight of what I had just done. 79 years of life, and I had never spoken up like that. I had whispered through grief, swallowed betrayal, and clutched the corners of rooms like wallpaper. But not today. Today, Eleanor Stroud had finally spoken. I didn't take the bus home this time. Walked 6 blocks to my little duplex on the edge of Hadley. The sun was beginning to set, draping the town in an orange hue, casting long shadows like ghosts trailing behind me. Inside, my house smelled of lavender and lemon polish. Still and silent. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out the last of my chamomile tea bags, and let the kettle hiss its slow breath as the water boiled. And then the phone rang. I stared at it. 3 rings. I knew it would be her. Hello. Why? Callie's voice was tight, trembling, half fury, half desperation. Why would you humiliate me like that? Humiliation, I said softly. No, dear. That was the truth. If it humiliated you, then maybe you should ask yourself why. You blindsided me. No, Callie, I said. You erased me. I just wrote myself back in. She went silent. Then, Clara won't speak to me. She's staying at her friend's house. Do you know how this looks? I wanted to say, do you know how I felt being treated like a maid? A burden. An afterthought. But I didn't. She wouldn't hear it. So I just said, that's not my burden to carry anymore. And I hung up. For the first time in a decade, I slept soundly. The next morning there was a knock at my door. It was Clara. She looked different, tired, pale, unsure. The confident girl from the baby shower had melted into something quieter, something rawer. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. Of course. We sat at the table. I poured her tea without asking. She placed the envelope on the table. The guardianship papers. A deed. My receipts, as I'd called them. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I loved your mother, I replied. And I loved you. And I thought maybe being silent would keep us whole. But it didn't. No, I admitted. It didn't. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that broke me. I used to have this dream when I was a kid, she said, staring at her tea. That you were my real mom. Because you were the only one who made me feel safe. I couldn't speak. I believed her, you know, when she said you were tired, or confused, or that you didn't want to come around anymore. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wanted to believe her, she added, because that made the rejection hurt less. I never rejected you, Clara. I know that now, she said, tears in her eyes. But back then, it felt like you disappeared. I reached across the table and took her hand. I never disappeared, baby. I was dismissed. The days that followed were quiet but different. Clara came by often, sometimes alone. Sometimes with a box of pastries or fresh flowers from the market. Sometimes she'd talk about the baby. Sometimes she'd just sit, no words needed. One evening she showed me a photo on her phone. It was of the nursery. A crib, pale blue walls, a bookshelf. And right above the rocker, framed picture. Me. Holding Clara as a baby. I put it up yesterday, she said. It's the only photo that matters. Callie didn't take it well. She sent texts, accusing me of manipulation, of stealing her daughter, of turning the family against her. But she never came in person. The power of truth, I've learned, is quiet. But once it lands, it spreads like wildfire. Callie couldn't stop what had already started. Word got out. Neighbors whispered. Church friends called. And then, like the final domino, Everett, her husband, showed up at my door. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. Worn. I didn't know, he said simply. Not all of it. I know. I'm sorry, Eleanor. You didn't speak up. I was scared, he admitted. She's loud. That's not an excuse, I said, my voice steady. You let her erase me. I know. He looked around the house. The photos. At the tea. At the quiet peace he no longer had. She's not doing well, he added. She'll survive, I replied. I did. Later that night I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in careful script. Inside was a photo. Very old one. Of Callie. In a hospital room. Holding a baby. But it wasn't Clara. And Callie wasn't smiling. On the back, in barely legible handwriting, were 3 words that chilled my spine. You know nothing. Like, comment your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe, because this story isn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I stared at the photograph long after the sun had set. The paper felt old, worn at the edges, slightly curled, as if it had been carried in someone's wallet for years. The hospital room in the picture was sterile, but the moment captured in it was far from ordinary. Callie looked hollow. Her lips were drawn in a line, her hands awkwardly cradling the baby. Her eyes weren't looking at the camera. They weren't looking at the baby either. They were looking past both, into something I couldn't yet see. The handwriting on the back haunted me. "You know nothing." It was like being yanked back into a room you thought you'd escaped. I traced the letters with my fingers, each stroke familiar in its ugliness. It was Callie's handwriting, no doubt. But it wasn't written with the same arrogance she used on birthday cards or holiday lists. This was careful, almost fearful. Who sent this? Why now? I placed the photo on the kitchen table and turned on the kettle. Again. A habit I fell back on when the silence grew heavy. But that night, even the steam whistling from the spout couldn't distract me from what was gnawing at my gut. Callie was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, Clara arrived without warning. She had a small notebook in her hand, the cover faded and cracked. "I found this in Mom's old storage unit," she said, sitting across from me. "I thought it might be yours." It was buried under boxes of baby clothes. I didn't recognize the notebook at first. But when I opened it, the handwriting hit me like a jolt to the chest. My own. From almost 30 years ago. It was a journal. My journal. Pages I had written when Callie first moved back in with her newborn, swearing she just needed a few months to get back on her feet. A few months turned into years. The entries were raw. Exhausted rants scrawled between diaper changes, emotional breakdowns and sleepless nights. But one entry stopped me cold. "Callie left again last night. Said she had to clear her head. She didn't take the baby. She never does. She says she's not ready. I don't think she ever was. Something's not right. She looks at the baby like it's a stranger." I flipped further. More details. Nights Callie would disappear. Lies she'd tell. Men who would drop her off in the middle of the night. Sometimes she didn't even know their names. One entry dated 8 months after Clara's birth read, "She's different now. Colder. Paranoid. She keeps checking the front window. Keeps asking if anyone's asked about the baby." And then this, barely a sentence, scribbled in shaky ink. "She said the baby isn't hers." I sat back, eyes wide. Clara, watching me, paled. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "What does that mean?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know. But I remember that night. I remember how strange she was. I hadn't thought about it in years. Maybe because I didn't want to. Maybe because I told myself she was just overwhelmed. Postpartum anxiety. Depression. Trauma from a difficult labor. But now the pieces didn't fit. The picture. The journal. That sentence. The baby isn't hers. That afternoon, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in decades. Helen Davenport, a retired nurse who used to work at the old county hospital where Callie gave birth. She answered after 2 rings, her voice scratchy but strong. "Helen, it's Eleanor Stroud. I'm sorry it's been so long." "Well, I'll be damned," she said with a chuckle. "I thought you ran off to Florida and forgot about us." "I wish it were a Florida story," I said. "But I need to ask you something. About a birth. 30 years ago. A young woman named Callie Stroud." Silence. Then. "You remember the year?" 1993 March. Another pause. Long one. "I do remember," she finally said. "Because it wasn't a regular case." "What do you mean?" "She came in screaming, saying she was in labor. But when we ran tests we couldn't confirm it. No signs of recent prenatal care. No record in our system. And she didn't have ID. But she gave birth." Helen hesitated. "Yes. But the baby was already at the hospital." I went cold. "What?" "She insisted it was hers. Refused to leave. Said the baby had her eyes. But the infant was abandoned. Left at the emergency entrance 2 hours earlier. We were trying to trace who left it. Then she shows up. Same night. Claims it. Demands discharge papers. Could barely breathe. She forged her name," Helen continued. "We knew it. But back then the system was a mess. No one wanted a custody battle. And she kept saying she was the mother, crying, threatening lawsuits. So they gave in. Let her leave with the child. Did you file a report? Oh, we did. But it disappeared. Someone higher up buried it. I quit not long after. My hands were shaking. Do you know where the original report is? Yes. I don't. But someone might. That night I told Clara everything. She sat frozen, her cup untouched, tears forming and then spilling before she even knew they had come. Oh, I might not be her daughter? She asked, her voice hollow. I don't know, I admitted. But we can find out. She stared at me. Would you still love me? I reached across the table, my heart breaking all over again. Clara, I raised you. I sang to you in the night when your cries shook the walls. I stood between you and your mother's rage more times than I can count. I would have given my life for you. That doesn't change. She nodded. A sob caught in her throat. Then she said, let's find the truth. 2 days later a package arrived at my door. No note. No return address. Inside, a worn leather binder. Inside the binder, hospital documents, a social worker's report, witness statements, and a birth certificate. But it wasn't Clara's name on it. It was another, one I hadn't heard in decades. And right beneath it, the name of the mother. It wasn't Callie. It was someone else entirely. Someone I thought had died years ago. My niece. And she had left a letter too. Eleanor, if you're reading this. I never meant for Clara to grow up in lies. But I had no choice. They were coming for me. The letter was written in blue ink, the kind that stains the edges of your fingertips if you read too long. The handwriting was rushed, panicked almost, but unmistakably hers. Dear Aunt Eleanor, if you're holding this, it means I never made it back. I wanted to. I swear I wanted to. But if you're reading this, I need you to know the truth about Clara. About why I left her. About why I gave her to Callie. And about what I was running from. I sat at the kitchen table, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the wood. Clara was upstairs, lying in bed. She hadn't spoken much since yesterday. The truth had rattled her, rattled us both, but what we were about to learn would go even deeper. I read aloud, each word shaking something loose in me. I was 21 when I had Clara. Her real name, the one I gave her, was Melody. My breath hitched. Melody. It had been the name of my late sister's favorite hymn. The one we sang at her funeral. The one I used to hum when I rocked Clara. Melody to sleep. I was working at the diner off Route 47, trying to make ends meet. I wasn't proud of my life then. I was dating a man named Ray. He was charming at first. But he wasn't who he said he was. Clenched my jaw. Even 30 years later, that name felt like a bruise forming. He started dealing drugs behind the diner. I didn't know at first. But when I found out and tried to leave, he told me I couldn't. Said if I ran, he'd find me. And when I got pregnant, he changed. Clara's footsteps padded softly down the stairs. She leaned in the doorway, her face pale, her arms crossed tight around her ribs. I paused, meeting her eyes. You okay? She gave a quiet nod. Keep going. I went to Callie in desperation. She was always the wild one, your daughter, so full of rebellion and fire. But I thought maybe she could help. Maybe she could hide me. I was wrong. So wrong. She offered to help. Offered to take Clara, Melody, and raise her for a while. Said she'd give me time to get away, to figure things out. But when I tried to come back, she told me never to call again. That Clara was hers now. That she'd already told everyone I died in a car accident. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered the accident. Or rather, what Callie had told us was the accident. A small obituary had been printed in a town 2 states away. Just a few lines. No photo. No funeral. We believed her. All of us. Clara was gripping the chair now. Why would she do that? The letter continued. I tried to take legal action once, But Ray found me before I could. Said he'd ruin everything. Said he'd tell everyone I was a junkie and unfit. That if I fought him, Clara would pay the price. So I ran. Changed my name. I watched from a distance. But I never stopped loving her. Not for a single day. Tears blurred the ink. I couldn't tell whose they were, mine or Clara's. I know she'll hate me for leaving. I hate myself. But if she ever learns the truth, please tell her I did it because I loved her. 'Cause I had no choice. Because I would have died trying to protect her. The letter ended with a small pressed daisy tucked in the fold. Faded. Fragile. Like the girl who wrote it. For a long time the room was silent. Clara sat across from me. The journal and the photo and the letter spread across the table between us like a crime scene. A past dissected and laid bare. "She's alive," she finally whispered. I nodded slowly. She was. Maybe still is. The letter doesn't have a date. I want to find her. I saw the same determination in her eyes I once saw in my own, standing in front of a courtroom the day my husband left me with nothing but a name and 2 children. Clara was mine. Not by blood, but by every bottle I warmed, every story I told, every night I held her while Callie raged at the moon. But she deserved to know who she came from, and why the people who claimed to love her hurt her so deeply. Later that night, Clara and I sat side by side on the couch, each of us holding a mug of tea we hadn't touched. "I feel like I've been erased," she said, staring out the window. "Like nothing I thought about myself is real." I placed a hand on hers. "You've been rewritten, not erased. You get to decide what your story becomes now." She looked at me, her eyes glassy but alive. "Then I want to find her. My real mom. I want to look her in the eye and ask her why. But also, I want to thank her for choosing you." Tears fell then, hers and mine. And for the first time in years, they weren't out of grief, but of healing. The next morning, Clara opened her laptop and began searching. Old records, missing persons forums, social media pages. And then she froze. "Grandma," she whispered. I leaned over her shoulder. The screen showed a photo. Older now, but unmistakable. A woman standing in front of a bakery in Arizona. Same eyes, same crooked smile. Same pressed daisy pinned to her apron. A caption underneath. "Owner and founder, Melody's Place, named after my greatest love and hardest goodbye." Hit like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss the rest of this story. Because sometimes the people who raise us are the ones who save us from the truth we were never meant to carry. We arrived in Arizona 3 days later. Clara had barely slept since she saw the photo. Every hour was filled with research, maps, bus schedules, cross-checking addresses and old business licenses. And me. I packed like a woman on a mission. This wasn't a vacation. It was a reckoning. We rode a Greyhound most of the way. Tight seats, humming lights overhead, and the distant cough of strangers lost in their own journeys. I watched Clara stare out the window as desert landscapes replaced the fields and trees we were used to. Her jaw clenched. Her fingers fidgeted. The kind of nervous energy you only carry when your heart's about to collide with your past. And then, on a quiet morning painted in gold, we stood in front of a small bakery called Melody's Place. The sign was handmade, the paint faded by sun and time. A flower box beneath the window brimmed with wild daisies. And inside, a woman with salt and pepper hair tied back in a braid moved behind the counter, humming softly. She looked up and froze. Clara stepped forward. "Mom!" The woman, Lena, dropped the cup she was drying. There are silences that hold more weight than any scream. That's what this was. A silence so thick it made my heart ache. Lena's hand trembled as she lifted it to her mouth. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't speak. Not yet. Clara was already crying. Her lips moved, but no sound came. And me. I stayed behind near the door, unsure if I even belonged in the room for this moment. But Lena saw me. "You're Eleanor." I nodded slowly. She came from around the counter, her steps hesitant, as if afraid we'd disappear. "You kept her alive," she whispered, tears falling now. You saved her. I did what any mother would do, I replied. Even when her own mother couldn't. She nodded, swallowing hard. I wanted to come back for her. I swear I did. Clara's voice cracked. Then why didn't you? The next hour was slow and delicate. We sat at a corner table with tea and pastries Lena insisted on making with shaky hands. Clara didn't touch hers. Lena spoke with the rhythm of regret. Every word heavy. Every story layered with pain. She told us how she fled Ray, changed her name, bounced from town to town. How she'd mailed the letter to my old address, praying someone would find it if things went wrong. I opened this bakery when I finally felt safe, she said. I named it after her. Not the name I gave her, but the melody she was to me. I've kept her with me every day, in every loaf of bread and song I hummed. Clara's face was unreadable. I used to dream you were looking for me, she whispered. But when you never came. Lena reached for her hand, but Clara pulled back. You let someone else take my life. You watched it from a distance and did nothing. I was scared, Lena said. But that doesn't excuse it. Clara stood, her hands shaking. I can't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She turned to leave. But just before the door closed behind her, she looked back. I just needed to see if you were real. We stayed in town that night. Lena offered her guest room. Clara declined. We found a motel on the edge of town, one of those single-floor places where the key is still an actual metal key and the air smells faintly of citrus and bleach. Clara lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought finding her would fix something, she said. But I feel more broken now. I sat beside her and took her hand. You're not broken. You're just full of truth. That's a heavy thing to carry. She turned to me, tears welling again. Do you hate her? I shook my head. No. Pity her. And I hurt for the woman she used to be. But hate. Well, because if she hadn't left, I wouldn't have had you. The next day we stopped by the bakery again. Not to talk. Not to cry. Just to leave something behind. Clara pressed a note into Lena's hand without saying a word. Lena unfolded it after we left, reading the simple line. If I ever forgive you, it'll be because I finally found peace in who I am, not who you were. Back at home weeks later, Clara sat at the table flipping through old photo albums we'd once packed away in anger. Her hands paused on a picture. Her as a baby in my arms. She touched the image, her thumb grazing the edge. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a familiar face. Kelly. Not with rage. Not with excuses. But with a folder in her hand. And eyes that carried the storm. I think it's time I told you the truth, she said. About everything. Callie stood on the porch like a woman carrying a lifetime's worth of guilt in a manila folder. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from the cold, but from the weight of what she was about to say. Behind her, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting a long shadow across my yard. I stepped aside and let her in. Clara watched from the kitchen, her brows pulled tight. She didn't say a word. Just sipped her tea slowly, like she wasn't sure if this was a conversation she wanted to be a part of. But Callie wasn't looking at her. She was looking at me. I've been a coward, she said, standing in the center of my living room, the folder clutched to her chest like a shield. But you deserve the truth, Eleanor. Both of you do. I motioned for her to sit. He didn't. Start talking, Clara said flatly, her voice cool as steel. Callie exhaled. It wasn't supposed to go like this, she began. Years ago, when I got married to Thomas, I was so afraid of disappointing him, of not being enough. And then, when we had our first baby, I panicked. I didn't know how to be a mother. You stepped in, Eleanor, like you always did. And it was easier to let you take the reins than admit I had no clue what I was doing. I narrowed my eyes. So you resented me for helping? No. I resented myself, she said. But it got twisted. I let Thomas feed that resentment. He said things like, your mother's trying to take over. Or, you'll never be good enough with her watching. And I believed him. She opened the folder. Inside were letters, handwritten. Dozens of them. "I wrote these to you," she whispered. "Every time I felt guilty. Every time I missed you. Every time I wished I'd said something kinder." Clara leaned forward. "Then why didn't you send them?" Callie looked her daughter in the eyes. "Because I didn't want to admit how badly I'd failed both of you." She turned back to me and pulled out an old photo, one I hadn't seen in years. It was Clara, maybe 5 years old, asleep on my lap on the porch swing. I was reading a book, one hand gently resting on her back. "I found this in a box Thomas had hidden in the attic," Callie said. "He didn't want Clara to remember how close you were. He even kept some of your letters from her. Hid them so she'd think you'd abandoned her." Clara gasped. "What?" Callie nodded slowly. "It was easier for him to control the narrative if he painted her as clingy, and you as the overbearing, unwanted matriarch." Tears sprang into Clara's eyes. "I used to wait for your letters, Grandma. And when they stopped I thought you stopped loving me." I reached for her hand, my voice soft. "I never stopped. Not for a single second." Clara turned to Callie. "You let him do that to me." "I was weak," Callie admitted. "I was too afraid of losing my marriage to protect the truth. And now," yes. She looked at me with wet eyes. "Now I've lost my marriage anyway." Thomas left. He ran off with a woman half his age. And he told me, right before he left, that he did it because he could never love someone who let her mother raise her child. That night, we sat in the living room, the fireplace casting soft amber light over the letters Callie had brought. Clara read through them one by one. Some made her cry. Some made her laugh softly. Others she simply held to her chest. "I feel like I've missed so many years," Clara whispered. "You didn't miss them," I said. "You just didn't know the whole truth." The next morning, Clara did something I hadn't expected. She invited Callie to stay for breakfast. They cooked together side by side. It was awkward, tilted, but real. And while they stirred batter and argued about how much cinnamon went into French toast, I saw something I thought I'd never see again. A bridge slowly being rebuilt. Not perfectly, not quickly, but with care. Later that afternoon, while Callie took a walk to clear her head, Clara and I sat on the porch swing. The same one from the photograph. "I think I'm ready to forgive her," she said quietly. "Not because she deserves it," I replied, "but because you do." Clara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You always know what to say." "That's because I've lived long enough to understand that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning how to carry the past without letting it poison the present." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We rocked in silence for a long while. Then the phone rang. It was Lena, Clara's mother. "I heard you found the letters." Lena's voice came softly through the receiver. "But there's more. There's something you don't know, Eleanor. Something Clara needs to hear. About her father. And the night I left." I stared at the phone, heart pounding. Another secret. Another crack in the story we thought we'd finally repaired. The phone call lingered in my ear long after Lena's voice had faded. She hadn't said much, just that she needed to see Clara and me in person, and that it couldn't wait any longer. I'd almost forgotten what Lena's voice sounded like. Hesitant. Like a woman who had spent decades swallowing words she was never allowed to say. Clara sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping tea she hadn't touched in 15 minutes. Her leg bounced nervously beneath the table. "Do you think she's telling the truth?" she asked. I sighed. "Truth isn't always about what happened, baby. Sometimes it's about what people think happened. And sometimes it's about what they couldn't bear to admit." Clara nodded slowly, her eyes darting to the door every time a car passed. Lena was coming. And with her, answers we weren't sure we wanted. When Lena finally arrived, she stood on my porch like she had when she was 17. Shaky hands, tear-streaked cheeks, and a folder tucked under her arm like a lifeline. Only now, her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes heavier with regret. She looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller and somehow more human. I wasn't sure you'd let me in, she whispered. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm here to finish what you started. She stepped into the house like it was a sacred ground she'd abandoned long ago. Clara didn't speak. She just stared at her mother, arms crossed, heart open but wounded. I need to explain, Lena began. But not just to defend myself. I came to tell you what happened the night I left. The night that changed everything. She unfolded a worn photograph from the folder. It was torn at the edges, faded with time. A man and a woman stood in front of a lake cabin. The man's arm around her waist. Lena was barely recognizable. 20 years old, glowing, unsure. That's your father, she told Clara. Clara blinked. I know. No, Lena said. You know the version I let you believe. That he was a troubled man. That he left us. But the truth is, Clara, he didn't leave. The room froze. What are you saying? Clara's voice trembled. Lena swallowed. He didn't leave. I ran. Clara stood, her hands curling into fists. You told me he walked out. That he stopped writing. That he didn't want me. Lena's lip quivered. Because I needed you to hate him more than you hated me. The silence in the room was deafening. Lena continued, her voice barely a whisper. Your father, Walter, he loved you, Clara. But he wasn't well. Not just emotionally. He was sick. Terminal. He found out just after your 2nd birthday. He didn't want you to watch him die slowly. He begged me to tell you he left so you wouldn't live your life tethered to grief. I stared at Lena, my heart breaking all over again. Walter had been many things. But a coward wasn't one of them. And you never thought I deserved to know that. Clara's voice cracked. I tried, Lena whispered. But every time I looked at you I saw him. And I was too ashamed to tell you that I had let the best man I ever knew die alone. Clara collapsed into the chair, covering her mouth with her hands. I hated him, she whispered. I hated him my entire life. I wrote letters I never sent. I told people he was a loser who didn't care. She looked at Lena, broken. And you let me carry that. Tears streamed down Lena's face. I didn't know how to be a mother. I thought sparing you the truth would protect you. But all it did was shatter everything we had. I watched the two of them, my hands folded on the table. Secrets don't die in silence. They grow teeth. They bite at everything good until all that's left is confusion and blame. I remember Walter, I said softly. I remember how he used to sing to Clara before bed. How he'd drive 6 hours just to spend a Sunday with her. He was a good man. Quiet man. And he adored his girls. Lena nodded slowly. I never stopped loving him. And yet, I said, meeting her eyes, you erased him. Just like your daughter tried to erase me. The truth had landed. 3 generations of women, each betrayed by silence. Clara stood up. Her voice was low but firm. I can't forgive you right now, she said to Lena. But I'm tired of carrying the wrong version of my story. She turned to me. And I'm sorry, Grandma, for letting them paint you as something you weren't. You didn't deserve that. I smiled gently. Sometimes healing starts when the truth finally gets to breathe. That night Lena stayed. She didn't sleep much. None of us did. We stayed up sharing old photos. Stories that hadn't been told. Regrets that had festered too long. And for the first time in years I saw a flicker of hope. Not everything could be fixed. But it could begin again. As the sun began to rise, a soft knock echoed at the front door. I opened it to find a man in a dark coat holding a thick envelope. Eleanor Hale, he asked. Yes. I'm with Heritage Legal Affairs. You've been listed as the primary contact for a trust, and a sealed document written by Walter Jensen before his death. He handed me the envelope. His final request was that it be opened the moment Lena and Clara made peace. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight but in consequence. It was old, yellowed at the edges, sealed with a wax stamp that bore the faint outline of a compass rose. I sat on the edge of the sofa, holding it in my hands while Lena paced and Clara stared like the parchment might burst into flames. It had been over 3 decades since Walter Jensen's name was spoken in this house without bitterness or sorrow attached. And now, here we were, 3 women tied together by his memory, holding a key to a truth that had waited longer than any of us had to speak. Lena knelt beside me. "Do you want to open it?" I looked at her. This woman who had once sat at my kitchen table as a teenager, lost and terrified, pregnant and shaking, now softened by time and tears. "No," I said gently. "You do it. It's your letter." Her fingers trembled as she broke the wax seal. Inside was a folded sheet of thick paper. Walter's handwriting was unmistakable, neat, sharp, and full of grace. Lena began to read aloud. "To my girls, Lena, Clara, and Eleanor, if she's still keeping this family standing, which I suspect she is. By the time you read this, I'll be gone." I asked Lena not to tell Clara about the cancer. It wasn't cowardice, it was love. I didn't want her to watch me fade into something unrecognizable. I didn't want her last memory of me to be the way I died, but rather the way I loved her. "Lena, if you're reading this, it means you've finally faced the pain you've run from all these years. Forgive you. I always did. You tried to protect Clara the best way you knew how, even if it broke your heart. And that's what real love sometimes looks like. Flawed, desperate, but still love. Clara, my girl, I never stopped loving you. I never left you. I asked your mother to lie for me, and I own that. But I watched over you every way I could. I sent birthday cards I never mailed. I had a bank account in your name I never told you about, because I wasn't sure if knowing would hurt more than help. Eleanor knows where it is. And Eleanor, thank you. For raising my girls when I couldn't. For being the backbone. The refuge. The witness. This world doesn't give women like you enough credit. But I saw you. Every moment. To all 3 of you, stop running from the past. Start healing. And tell the truth. Especially when it's the hardest thing to say. Love always. Walter." When the last word left Lena's lips, the room went utterly still. No one moved. Not even the clock dared to tick. Tears rolled silently down Clara's cheeks. "I had a father who loved me," she whispered. "All this time I thought I was the reason he left." Lena reached for her, and this time Clara didn't pull away. Later that afternoon, we opened the safe Walter had mentioned. The bank documents were still there, untouched for 32 years. There was more than just money. There were photos, letters, and even a little cassette tape labeled, "Clara's Laugh, Age 2. We sat and listened to it on an old Walkman. Clara's tiny giggle filled the living room. Walter had held on to it all. That night Clara asked to stay. Lena cooked dinner. Her first time in my kitchen in decades. It was clumsy, full of burned toast and laughter, but it was something we hadn't had in years. Weeks later, the baby shower came and went without drama. Yes, I was invited this time. Clara printed a new photo wall, this time placing my image. Me holding baby Clara in my lap, dead center. But I didn't come to the party for redemption. I came with the trust documents Walter had prepared. Because his account, worth over $200,000, was now officially transferred into Clara's name. And Lena. She insisted on setting up a scholarship fund in Walter's memory with a portion of it, for young fathers with terminal illness who needed support and dignity. Some wounds never vanish. They soften like river stones smoothed by time. But they never disappear. Families fracture not always from hatred, but from silence, from fear, from trying too hard to protect each other from pain that needs to breathe. But I've learned something after 88 long years. Secrets rot in the dark. But truth is light. And light always finds its way in. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful grandma stories that remind us of the strength that lives in silence, and the courage it takes to speak. What did Walter's letter mean to you? Tell us in the comments below. Until next time, keep listening to the women who've lived and loved long enough to teach us all.